The number one need they had was housing. They said sort of none of these great cultural ideas matter if we don't have anywhere to live, followed quickly by we don't have strong broadband, followed by childcare, followed by transportation, medical services, et cetera. Quality of life amenities are right in there with the need, but that's the thing with rural is they don't have the luxury of focusing on one of these issues over another. They have to tackle all of them at the same time.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Alquist Labs, Turing, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Let's talk about 3D printing. Meet Zachary Mannheimer, founder and CEO of Alquist, a 3D printing construction company that uses cutting-edge technology to create houses, buildings, and other structures aimed at dropping the cost of homes and solving the housing crisis. After a road trip from New York City to 22 cities around the country, Zachary chose and settled in Des Moines in 2007, founding the Des Moines Social Club, an arts and educational nonprofit. In 11 years of operations, DMSC hosted over 10,000 events for over 1 million patrons. In 2020, Zachary co-founded Atlas Community Studios, a team helping rural communities plan for growth in over 20 states, where the main concern is housing. He lives in Iowa City with his wife, Sarah, and their 3 kids, Mira, Benjamin, and Fiona. Meet Zachary. Zachary Mannheimer, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk about from running off-Broadway theater in New York to printing 3D construction homes. It's going to be a wild journey for us in the next 20 minutes. But first, where are you calling from right now?
I'm at home in Iowa City, Iowa.
And so I believe that I think this is episode 400 and something, you are the first person that I have from Iowa, which makes me very excited. But I think you're the second or third person that is working on 3D home construction, which is, something that I've gotten pretty passionate about myself. So I'm excited for this conversation. But you have to take me back first to your job as running off-Broadway theaters. My brother is a Broadway musical director, and so it's a very, very close to my heart as well. But I'd love to hear where you're coming from.
Oh, that's terrific. I was a theater and philosophy major in college. So when I graduated, I had absolutely zero job prospects. I moved to London. I lived in London for about 2 years doing theater over there. And then my visa expired and I had to come back to the States. And I did what every other New York theater major or any other theater major does in America. We went to New York. And my family originally, I grew up outside Philadelphia. I'm from the East Coast. My family's grew up in New York City, so I was very familiar with it. So I lived in Brooklyn for almost 10 years, and I wish I was doing off Broadway. I was doing off Broadway, so way off. I started a company there called the Subjective Theater Company that ran for a little over 10 years. And we did very avant-garde experimental shows all around New York City. I worked with the New York Fringe Festival for a while, and it was great. And it had a really wonderful sense of community. But what we found there was that the shows that we were producing at the time were fairly political in nature. And the people around me in Brooklyn, everybody kind of thought like me, acted like me, played like me, ate like me, and I didn't feel that it was very healthy to be living in a bubble, either as an artist or as a human. And I wanted to go off and see the rest of the country. So that's where that came from.
And so, a lot of people say they want to see the rest of the country, but not many people get into a car and visit, 22 cities in a road trip?
22 cities. Yes. I was the summer of 2007. I went to 22.
And what was the purpose of that? So why? What? I understand you're talking. You want to get exposed to what's actually happening. In this country. Was there a mission? Did you know what you were trying to achieve at the end of this road trip?
Yeah, I mean, what it became was very different than what I was originally thinking. It was much better. But the original idea was I was searching for the next place I wanted to live. I wanted a community that was roughly 500,000 people in the metro, which compared to New York City is small. I wanted a city that was more like a third city. I wanted a city that had struggled to retain and bring in the next generation of workforce. I wanted a city that needed some revitalization in the downtown. And I wanted one that had an art scene that was burgeoning but not established nationally, and something that was as close to 50-50 politically as I could find. And so Des Moines checked all my boxes.
And so you're in Des Moines, Iowa, and so and from that point on, you diverge quite a bit from theater. And why? So why not stay in theater, even though you're transitioning to a place that perhaps is less of a bubble-like nature?
Well, I still was doing theater. I was directing theater quite a bit when I first moved there, but over time that dropped away because my responsibilities shifted for what we wanted to do. So myself and many other people got together and we formed a nonprofit that became the Des Moines Social Club. That was a space in downtown Des Moines that produced thousands of different events in every single arts-related medium. We wanted a real sense of community of different people, different ideologies, different backgrounds, different demographics coming together. And so that's why we wanted to see how many different artistic mediums could we hit. So there was at least something for everybody at least once a month. And I was still directing shows, but over time that peeled away in terms of responsibilities to run the nonprofit, to work with all sorts of different people around town. And it became something that was much larger than just an arts-based organization. It was trying to build community in the space.
Right. So I'm hearing this is where the social aspects are starting to sink in, right? When you're actually, you're starting to bridge from the world of arts and what you did enough off Broadway, but now you're actually understanding, okay, well, there's actually a pretty big social impact that is being done. And I guess from that point on, you just continue to expand on that and concentrate on that, right?
Yeah, it kept growing, and as it kept getting bigger and getting successful and getting established in the place that we were, and this took several years, we started getting calls from other smaller communities, more rural, mostly around Iowa, that wanted to do something similar, and they saw this as a viable option for how to revitalize a community and help from an economic model, population model, et cetera. And so we started traveling to some small communities, and my original town I grew up in was rural when I was born, but by the time I graduated high school, it ceased to be rural. It became suburban. It got sucked into the Philadelphia metro. And I really never wanted to see that happen again to any other community. And so we began traveling to these rural communities, and I developed a true passion for it. And it's through that work that we developed our creative placemaking model that eventually became my other organization, which is called Atlas.
And so we're in 2020, and you then start to focus your work on rural communities, but not just at one point you can imagine a person working with a rural community coming and volunteering and doing some hands-on work with charity and et cetera. But you're actually thinking of a different approach, and you're actually looking at this more strategically with Atlas Community Studios, and you're actually planning growth for over 20 states. What does that mean, to plan for growth, especially in the world of housing, especially as you do it through, more than almost 24 communities?
Yeah, we originally were going to these communities to help them with revitalization efforts, mostly on a cultural scale. How can we help them with public murals, with fixing up storefronts and possibly creating coffee shops, cultural centers, et cetera? But we began to, and that was our background, but we began to hear things like, we really need childcare. Childcare is essential. Medical services, our hospital left, years ago. And these are towns averaging around 3,000 people. And then they said, of course, the number one need they had was housing. They said sort of none of these great cultural ideas matter if we don't have anywhere to live, followed quickly by we don't have strong broadband, followed by childcare, followed by transportation, medical services, et cetera. Quality of life amenities are right in there with the need, but that's the thing with rural is they don't have the luxury of focusing on one of these issues over another. They have to tackle all of them at the same time. And so that's how we fell into housing. And we're traveling to these towns in 20 states and more over several years. And the need in rural Mississippi is the same need in rural Minnesota. It's identical in terms of housing that they need there. And so we were being challenged and asked all the time to try to figure out a solution to the rural housing crisis. And, folks have been trying to do this for decades. And right around 2016-ish, I was remembering this, I got asked to go to an event featuring a futurist where there was a guy coming who said he was a futurist. I never knew what that meant, but it sounded interesting. So I went to this talk. And he was talking about all sorts of things that were going to happen over the next 20, 30 years. And one of them was 3D printing technology of printing buildings. And I had never heard of that before. And he's showing all these videos of it happening. It's blowing my mind. And somebody in the audience asked, hey, how long until you think this is the norm for the construction industry worldwide? And he's thought about it. He said, well, probably 10 to 15 years. It's going to take that long because of zoning and unions and regulation and all sorts of things that you got to work through. And so that seemed to make sense. Everybody in the room kind of agreed with it. But afterwards, I went up to him. I bought a copy of his book. His name is Thomas Frey. And I asked him, I said, hey, so I agree with you about what you were saying for urban areas. But for rural communities, a lot of the barriers and hurdles that you see may not be true. Do you think that we could start 3D printing in rural faster than urban? He thought about it and he said, yeah, I never considered that. I kind of think you're right. And so that started off several conversations I had with him on email. We met for dinner in Omaha once and just talking about it. He kind of coached me through some of these ideas. And that was all I needed. Then I was off and running, doing tons of research on the technology, how to make it happen. And that's how we arrived where we are today.
So take me back a little bit to rural areas and housing. Is it simply a matter of there are not enough houses to house all the people that need housing? Or is it that the infrastructure of the houses is bad? What is actually the pain point that you're looking at?
So it's all of the above, and it kind of comes back to wanting to build community, and that's always my goal. What we see here in rural communities, there's plenty of homes, typically less that are $100,000 or less, but most of those need significant fixing up, and not everybody's willing to do that. And there's sometimes homes in the $250,000 to $300,000 and more, but that prices out normally 60-70% of the market there. It's that middle ground where we're not seeing the homes being built, or the other concern is that you've got people aging in place, that they need to move on to a smaller unit, and giving up that home to put it back on the market. That's something else that we're seeing across the board, senior housing, et cetera. So that's the need in all of these places. And the bottom line is the cost to build doesn't equal the cost to sell. And there's this myth in rural America that there's no good paying jobs, and that's completely a myth. There's thousands of good paying jobs in rural. There's simply not enough people to take the jobs. And that was true before COVID, but COVID has really changed everything. We used to see people migrating from first cities to second cities. Now we're seeing people migrating from first cities to fifth cities. And that's a major shift. And right now we see a huge opportunity for rural America to grab it and build the housing that's needed, or they're going to miss the boat.
And so with Alquist 3D, did I say that correct? Alquist?
Alquist, yes.
Where does that name come from? First of all, you're talking about 3D printing with how construction, tech, and housing, but what does Alquist mean?
So Alquist goes back to my theater background. It's super obscure. There was a play, maybe not that obscure. There's a play that was written in 1919 called RUR, which stands for Rossum's Universal Robots. It's by a Czechoslovakian writer named Karel Čapek, who I love. RUR was the first piece of literature ever to coin the term robot. That's where robot comes from. And It was the first piece of literature that was the age-old sci-fi plot where robots are created. They learn, they decide they don't like their surroundings, and they try to take over and kill humanity. And that's basically the plot of the show. But there's one character, the main engineer in the play, whose name is Alquist. He's the only person in the show that believes that robots and humans can coexist peacefully. So that's where the name comes from.
I love it. Okay, so now more strategically about Alquist and how you're meeting in Omaha for dinner, and you're saying, okay, this is actually a viable solution. I mean, we can actually improve, cities and multiple states across the United States by leveraging this technology. From that, what do you do then? How do you actually get started from that point on?
So we've got a list of well over 100 communities that would like us to come and build yesterday if we had the ability to do it. And we're ramping up right now. We're obviously in our startup phase. We were established late last year, so it's still the beginning. We're in the process of doing our first home right now in Richmond, Virginia. And this is where things shifted for us, was that we were fortunate enough to become acquainted with Dr. Andrew McCoy, who runs the housing department at Virginia Tech University. And they have been studying this for a long time. And the state of Virginia offered a grant to folks who wanted to come and experiment and see if 3D can really be an answer for the future. So Alquist and Virginia Tech collaborated to get the grant. We're working together right now to build the first 3D home that will be built for residential sale at an affordable level in America. This is also the first one that's going to have public funds that are helping build it. It's going to be built in Richmond, Virginia. We're going to do the print the end of this month. And then the home will be constructed over the next couple of weeks with the rest of the build out. But the print time will be super fast. The first one, it's going to be about a week for the print for a 1,500 square foot home. We believe by the second or third print, we'll probably be able to get that time down to 2 or 3 days.
So walk me through the supply chain from the moment that you have a plot of land that you want to build on to the moment where a family can actually go in there and go to sleep at night and cook dinner. And how does the supply chain actually look from start to finish?
So first step is acquiring the land. And this is why our focus is rural. Richmond obviously is not rural. That's where the folks with the grant wanted us to produce the home. That's fine. Every other community that we do this year and next year will likely be rural. So acquiring the land is number one. And in many rural communities, there's lots of land to be acquired. But then you need the infrastructure that the community might need to help out with, which is terms of running, utilities, electrical, et cetera. So first we acquire the land. There's lots of ways to do that. Then we design the home. So we have one design currently. It's sort of a modern farmhouse. We wanted to do something that was approachable. When people think of a 3D home, they think of futuristic things and it kind of blows people's minds. And we wanted something that looks very much like a traditional home that people have. We have lots of other designs that get crazier, and we'll be revealing those later this year. So somebody would choose which style of home they want from us. We'll work with them to customize it, and that's the beauty of 3D, is that we can really customize this quickly. Once we all decide on a design, we bring in our engineers and the rest of the team and our technicians, and we print the base of the home. So you think of it this way, that a concrete 3D home is just like any other home, except the walls are made out of concrete instead of wood. That's the only difference. Otherwise, it's almost identical. So the print time can take 2 to 3 days. Then we bring in the electricians, the plumbers, the HVAC unit, the roofers. There are some cases where we will be printing the roof. The first few homes we will not be. We're taking it slow. But the goal is to be able to have a brand new home from start to finish, from when the print starts to when families can move in about 3.5 months. That's what we're shooting for. These first couple homes will take a little bit longer, but by next year, that's where we want to be.
Unbelievable. And I can, obviously, I don't think that anybody has any doubt that this is completely the future. And I think it's a good question whether it's in 5 years or whether it's in 15 years. But I personally get excited just hearing that somebody in Iowa right now is sitting and is going to be printing a home in Richmond, Virginia, and is already thinking about the scale of it and how to do it in a startup phase. And it's not just it's not an experiment. It's actually a family is going to be living in this home, and that's, I think, to me, one of the most exciting aspects. And I really want to thank you for coming here. And I have a few questions for you before we finish, if you're ready for them.
Absolutely.
Okay, they're not connected to homes, but they're connected to you. What is one of your favorite subjects from middle school or high school?
The subject that changed my life in high school was I got to be part of a creative writing program. And there was a teacher there named Ms. Fox, who inspired me and many other people I know to really think creatively, think outside the box, and really to become an optimist, to see the world in a positive way, that just because you have an idea and there's challenges to making that idea a reality doesn't mean it can't happen. It means it can happen, and you have to pursue it.
And it sounds like you need a lot of optimism, and you need a lot of out-of-the-box thinking and creativity to do what you're doing today. So that makes a lot of sense. And who would be one of your role models, or somebody that inspires you in one way or another?
Oh, there's lots of people. I go back to Joe Papp, who started the Public Theater in New York and really fostered the sense of community. Jack Kerouac and what he was able to create and inspire folks to get to the next level. People that I'm reading now that are really taking things to the new level. There was a great book came out a year or two ago by Steve Case, Third Wave, that talks about where things are going to be moving. I'm trying to read all the time and expand on ideas, and there's so many out there. So those are top of mind today. But if you ask me tomorrow, they could be different.
Of course. And what are 3 words that you would use to describe yourself?
Driven, excitable, and I would say circus-like, creative. Always trying to see what's next, what's fun, how do we bring people together.
And I'll definitely add optimist to that list if you'll allow me. But Zachary, thank you very
Absolutely.
much for your time. This was wonderful. Thank you for making, honestly, both people's lives better, but the world eventually better. And regardless of what happens with Alquist 3D, just the inertia that is being created here, and the way that this is being shown to the world, I think is going to have a tremendous ripple effect, not just in the 3D housing, but in everything that we think about in the day to day. That we say it was being done in one way for thousands of years, really, and today we can actually do things differently. And I think that's going to be very exciting. So thank you very much, Zachary.
Thank you. The housing industry is overdue for disruption, so this will be fun.
Take care. Bye-bye.